Welcome to another episode of the NK Active podcast. This month, we're going to be chatting about shoes and in particular the ability how shoes can be helpful throughout a part of a treatment program, because I think there's a lot of myths out there with regards to footwear, what they can and can't do. And for a lot of people, when they've got an injury, we know from the evidence that actually people changing their footwear is people's first port of call. And sometimes that's helpful, sometimes that's not. But I think also shoes can get a bit of a bad rep in that there are some outlandish claims out there from what shoes can and can't do. And we have to remember that the ability of what a shoe does, the impact it has on someone could be different in every single person, but there are some sort of common traits out there in shoes, in certain design features that can be helpful for certain problems. And obviously we got joined by one of our other podiatrists, Charlie, and what's interesting is that Charlie, and she'll tell you about her story in a minute, but she does have hypermobility and has been having some pain in the ball of the foot. And I sort of made a suggestion about trying a particular style of shoe, and I think it's fair to say the difference it has made to Charlie's sort of pain levels, discomfort, and what she can and can't do has been quite dramatic. Now, I will also apologise. You may hear some background noise. It's Britain. It's raining. Sorry. So, Charlie, talk me through about, just give people listening regards a bit of background of what's going on.
Yeah, so I have kind of undiagnosed hypermobility. So what that means is that my joints work to kind of long end ranges. So I'm very, very mobile as a consequence of that. So part of that means that I do a lot of training, strength training, to work on the musculoskeletal structures that support my joints to try and help with fatigue. So sometimes I'm really incredibly tired. I have phases where I drop things. I can sometimes just have general achiness that kind of sits everywhere from kind of hips, knees, shoulders and lower back. And part of the strength training work has helped that and helped me, I guess, do my day-to-day activities fairly well. And then recently, it's one of those odd things. I've always had discomfort in the feet and the kind of legs, but it becomes part of my normal. So I've never really thought anything of it. And it's just only so recently, because I've changed what I'm doing. I'm getting out a little bit more. I'm pretty sure COVID has meant that I was seeking outside and outdoors a little bit more than often, that I started to notice the pain in the ball of my feet was more awareness of it. So it's not that intensity pain. It's not a pain that stops me doing anything or debilitates me in any way. It's just that awareness, that niggle that kind of sits there day to day, kind of groaning away. And then I tend to just put it out of my mind, forget about it and kind of move on. And then we were just having a conversation, I think, about footwear, weren't we? Just generally about kind of the characteristics of shoes and where it would sit within the rehab plan, and just formulating that kind of process. And we tend to do that a lot in clinic. And then Nick offered kind of, maybe could you have a go at trying one of these shoes and just see how you get on? So I went for, I think it's the Scaucony Axon, isn't it? As you can tell, yeah. Great in the shoe department. And kind of just, it felt comfortable. Wore it, I guess, for the first couple of days, and my ankles and my feet particularly didn't like the feel of them. They felt very different. But after about a week or so, actually, pain kind of resolved. It was quite odd. And when I talk about pain, it's more of that awareness and discomfort. And I think what was quite dramatic for me was that ability to then go, oh, this is what it's like to live day to day without any niggles, without any discomfort, without that awareness. And I'd actually forgotten, maybe in kind of 10, 15 years, what that felt like.
Yeah.
So that's been quite nice. Obviously, if I do too much or if I overload myself in the week, i.e. doing too much in terms of training and work, and obviously stress and hunger all play a role in that, then I can still get symptoms. But actually, this in combination with my orthosis, with moderating and making sure my week of activity is kind of planned, I don't have any symptoms. And so far, I think it's, 4-6 weeks in, we've given it a good old road test, and we did put Charlie through a 3D gait analysis and compared those to other shoes, and I'll speak about that in a bit. But with regards to the shoe, is it something you wear 24/7? How do you, what do you do? The answer I should give you is I live and die in them, but I don't. I wear them for the activities that I think I'm going to fatigue the most in. So here, when I'm at work, I will use them for that. If I think I'm going to do a longish walk, then I will slip into these. But actually, if I'm going out with friends, or I usually live in flip-flops and sandals, I tend to wear that on those days. So I would say probably roughly 50% of my time are in these trainers, and the other 50 I'm wearing other things. But
this is the thing, is it's not a life sentence of you. We know there's a particular type of shoe, and we'll talk about the characteristics of the shoe and why it helps, and why we ordered those shoes in later on. But it's that for me, that's what we tell all our patients in clinic, is that the idea of a shoe is another tool to offload some structures. And we know this shoe helps offload your forefoot, but then you're your own boss. You decide when is it that you want to wear the shoe, when you don't want to wear the shoe. It's not a life sentence, oh my God, you must live and die in these shoes now, that's it, you can't wear anything else. And it's the same with orthosis, isn't it? It's about giving you as many tools as you can in your toolbox. Then you can then decide what tool you want to use at what time to help give you the help you need, because the hypermobility isn't going to go away. It's always going to be there. So it's not as if we're looking to cure a problem. We're just looking at finding ways to help you manage things better.
And I think that's the bit I'd maybe forgotten as a clinician, is that, you know, I have the knowledge and understanding of what it's like to live with pain and musculoskeletal, and I appreciate tissues and joints and their structures and how they operate and pathology. But it was still, as a patient and a person, that ability to go, wow, today I've done okay. There is nothing. Yeah. I'm not going home with feeling a bit achy or a bit sore, or just this awareness. And I'd forgotten what it felt like to go, actually, you know what? I could go for that 10-kilometre walk and not feel anything of it. And I guess that's the behaviour trait, is that living with a condition for so long, I've become a master at my own ability to look after myself. So I'm making those subtle cues and decisions all the time. So I'm very good at going, actually, you know what? I know how to stick under 12,000 steps, because I know over 12,000 is where I'm going to start to get aches. Yep. I know how to, you know, maybe not lift so much, or like we change the whole of the weight room, don't we? So that I can lift as little as possible. So on my longer day on a Tuesday when I'm in clinic, I'm not lifting quite as much for a longer period of time. Yep. And I've naturally been able to kind of modify the environment and place that I'm in to suit me, but it was lovely to be able to have those moments where it felt like I was in control again.
Yeah, and it's nice that we've been able to just do that, and it's also like you've been able to put yourself in our patient's shoes.
Literally.
I want to say no pun intended, but it's sort of,
we're there. We're going to roll with it.
Because, as you say, we can get lost in the world of being a clinician at times, but it's always not nice to remind, but actually to see ourselves from, because you've been able to see this now from when we sit there, we're making footwear recommendations for certain problems, and we know the theory, the science, the evidence behind it, but now you've got your own lived experience of, actually, no, this has made a big difference.
Yeah, and some of the simplest changes are the most effective. I think sometimes we have this habit of overcomplicating everything. But actually going back to your basics and that simplicity actually can make a huge difference. And I think that's the thing as well that I'm very mindful of. It's that I'm not going to resolve everything, and meeting my expectations. Like, I do like to wear different footwear. I do wear different things. I don't want to be confined to one pair of trainers.
No.
So to be able to know what's there and then me make the decisions. And sometimes I do make the decision that I'm going to have pain the next day, but I'll cope and manage with that.
But that's not a bad thing, and it's helping breaking this connotation in society that we assume pain is bad. It's not.
Yeah, it's just an awareness that I'm tired and I've overworked. So Charlie, check in with yourself, work out what you're going to do today. Can you modify to make life easier?
Yeah. So the reason why we tried that shoe, there's a shoe, here's one of my new ones, Scaucony Endorphin range, and so this is the Endorphin Speed, which is their sort of training type trainer, and then I've also got the Endorphin Pro, which is a racing type shoe. And a lot of people would have heard about the shoe, but in case you haven't, it's basically got a nylon plate in the middle of the midsole, and effectively you can see, for those that are watching on YouTube, apologies if you're listening to this because you won't be able to see, but effectively the shoe has a bit of a rocker in the forefoot area. So as you go to push off, you don't bend your toes, but you don't need to use your forefoot as much. So you can help you offload and really just push you forward. And having sort of the nylon plate in these shoes and then the carbon plate in the Endorphin Pros just helps you with that. And we find it very helpful in people who have got plantar plate injuries, big toe arthritis. We know having a stiffer sole is good for midfoot arthritis. I know personally for me, running in this type of shoe helped relieve my calf issues on running. And there are different brands out there. You've got the Hoka Carbon X, and then Hoka were one of the first running footwear brands to really bring to mass market a rocker style shoe, which they have sort of been very well known for. Then before that, on day-to-day walking, you had MBTs, which in my opinion was the rock was too severe. Then you had the Skechers Tone Up, which didn't go down too well because they've got sued for a lot of money for making some claims that wasn't quite true in America. But where the Axon come in is that it's basically based off the Endorphin shoes. But the only difference is it doesn't have that nylon or carbon plate. It still has that rocker effect in there, but that does mean that it brings it down to just under the £100 mark, whereas the shoes I'm holding in my hands, the Endorphin Speeds, I think are around 140, 130, and then the Pros are up around the 160 to 180 range, I think, off the top of my head, maybe slightly more. So it actually brings it down into a more manageable price bracket. Because if you're not a runner and you're just using the shoe, because Charlie doesn't run, running isn't her thing. She doesn't enjoy it, which is fair enough. Not everyone enjoys running, but she does enjoy her walking. And it's sort of like, well, actually, can we find a shoe that can do that for her, that she can use on a daily basis without having to buy a top of the range running shoe? And this is where the Axon is a new shoe, and that really does that really well. And what was interesting was that when testing her against, say, just a normal type of running shoe, so it doesn't have a rocker, it's just what is called a neutral shoe. I'm not a big fan of categorizing shoes into neutral, cushioned and support, because I don't think that's the right way to go personally. But when we did test her in a shoe as a baseline and then tested her in the Axon, what we did see was that we did see better function through the hips region on pushing her. So what we call this sagittal plane. So the ability to push herself forward was improved using the Axon. We also did see some improvement in stability around the hip region in using this shoe. And it's interesting that when asking Charlie about it, some of her feedback has always been about, I just feel like I'm using less energy when using the shoe. Just walking just feels easier. And I think it's that rocker effect within the shoe that does it. And this is why it's a shoe that we do tend to recommend on quite a regular basis. So Charlie, sort of tell us about then what does this mean then for you going forward with footwear when helping to manage your own problems?
I think for me it's that awareness now of having another tool that I can put in that kind of armory that sits with the orthosis, that sticks with that regular kind of strength training, but also that kind of personal element of how I feel. Like there are some days where I'm going to wear a pair of heels, I'm probably going to wear the wrong sandals, but I will forego the outcomes of the next day. But I actually have strategies in place. So I know what I need to do. I know how to offload. I know how to reload to make things more comfortable for my feet and lower limbs. So I think it is just allowing me to have that scope to maybe do more and to, I guess, have that ability to maybe replan some of my week that maybe I wouldn't have to. So what I'm starting to notice is, as you said, that I feel like I'm more efficient. So I'm actually starting to feel less tired at the end of the week. And I know there's no research, there's no kind of evidence around that. But as an internal feeling, whether that has a placebo effect, so whether that's just my mind deciding that feels better, I feel like actually when it comes to that Friday gym session, I'm in a better frame of mind to get the job done, to go and do the work that needs to be done, ready to head into the weekend. So whether it be placebo, whether it be evidence, whether it be just the way that I'm feeling about it, I think that's really important, that it's something that I can then use again if I need to.
And that's lovely to hear, because as sort of a podiatrist and a young researcher, you're with your other hats on, you're like, I want to know the evidence, I want to know the research, I want to know why. But then with Charlie hat on as Charlie, just as Charlie, actually I'm getting the impression that you're not really bothered. You're just glad it helps. And as a normal human being, you're like, I know this helps me. I'm not too sure why. It may have an effect. It may be placebo, but all I know is I see a positive change when doing this. So I'm going to continue on.
Yeah, and I think it's about being curious, isn't it? I think that's the exciting part of why I went into research, is that we don't know everything. And part of that is through being curious and through play and through trialing stuff. You're going to find things that do work and some stuff that don't. And for me, these trainers helped in having a positive effect that do work for me in the way that I function and move.
Yeah, and I think it's we're lucky that we're able to back up with some data from the 3D gate as to why things are improving whilst using these shoes compared to others. So then going back to more of a clinical aspect with side of things, is it a case of that if we've got someone with a plantar plate injury or a turf toe problem, is it something that they may have to use this type of shoe forever, or could it be used just for a sort of a 3-6 month period and then look at going?
Yeah, I think the way I see these trainers are they're a tool for you to help. So it's about thinking about what do you want that trainer to kind of contribute to. So it's not going to resolve everything. So I think it's thinking about your expectations. No one shoe can solve foot pain, but it can help with some of the issues that you may be having. So for me, when I'm sitting in clinic, I'm thinking about, can footwear be part of that process to help offload a structure, whether that be in the short term or longer term? What materials are going to be needed and how is that going to do? And actually having trainers with a forefoot rocker can be really helpful with forefoot pathology. You may find that initially you use them every day as much as possible just to get your symptoms down. And once they're at a manageable level and that you're confident and you have a strategy of how to manage that, then you can start to play around with what you can and can't get rid of. So I don't think footwear, one style will be forever, but I think it's about managing your symptoms and what you wish to achieve, and that will be different for everyone. Some people will seek to have complete resolution, and actually sometimes maybe then trainers, footwear, orthosis aren't the right avenue. That may require something like a steroid injection or surgical input. However, if it's something a little bit more like a condition that you have to live with, so with osteoarthritis, you're going to have better days and not so good days. So then it's knowing maybe on your not so good days you become that kind of choose that sensibler option compared to on your better days. Then maybe you can start to think about, if there's an event or a special occasion, you can maybe play outside of the rule book slightly.
Yeah, and I think this is where footwear can be really helpful, because your experience of these shoes will be different from the next person and will be different from the person after that. But we know there are certain footwear characteristics within their designs that can sort of give a certain effect, as it were. The thing we can't tell you is actually how your body's going to react to that effect, because the amount of load going through the body is a constant. So we've taken off the forefoot, we've put it elsewhere. In your instance, it's hard to say where it has gone. But I think because you do a lot of your own strength training, where the load has gone, most probably slightly further up the chain, is actually you just do your generalized strength work so it can cope with that because it's strong enough to cope with it. So I think this is really that important point of the footwear. It's a never standalone. It's not just the footwear on its own. It's part of a treatment process. And it may be long term, it may be short term. And we may find someone may find the Axon helpful, the next person may find the Hoka Carbon X a better shoe for them, just depending on the shape of their foot and how they react to them. But we know in general that having that rocker will help with the forefoot problems, the midfoot arthritis. We know having a high-heeled shoe will help better with your Achilles problem. We know possibly dropping the heel height on the shoe may help offload knee issues. But that doesn't mean to say that every person who has those set problems will end up that type of shoe, because everyone is different.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes research in musculoskeletal care so wonderful, because no one follows necessarily a set pattern. So I think that's, as a patient, clinician and researcher, I think there's also something about what we call tailored care. So it's about matching your care to you as a person and being mindful that the evidence that is out there and the resources and ideas that people are generating or asking for will require a bit of your curiosity as well to put together. And it's not to be disheartened. I think it's taken me a long time to find things that work for me, and sometimes things don't work. But that's okay. Like, you just keep trying until you find some stuff that does work and fits into your world.
Well, thank you very much for coming on and sort of sharing your thoughts as Charlie about your experience of using footwear to help as part of a global management treatment plan, as it were. So thank you for listening. As always, if you've got any questions, just pop them in the comments, or please do get in contact with us. Please also do subscribe to the podcast, and we shall see you next month. See you later. Bye.